Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jennifer and I'll be your narrator for the day. What you're about to hear is an original human written work of science fiction. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin.
Human casually roasts apex predator over fire while she watches in horror. The planet Gaia 7 was dying and it wanted to take everything with it. Kiara's crests flattened instinctively as her pod breached the upper atmosphere, the hull screaming against toxic clouds that could dissolve titanium plating in under 6 hours. Grade S biohazard. The worst classification in the Preserver archives. Worlds like this weren't colonized. They were quarantined, studied from orbit, and left to rot in their own lethality. And somewhere down there, a human was already dead. She checked the data slate one more time as her descent pod carved through the canopy, snapping trees as thick as her torso like kindling. The Terran Vanguard scout ship Polaris Dawn had gone dark 3 cycles ago after experiencing catastrophic engine failure. One survivor confirmed, scout pilot Josh Cooper, human, male, age 32 standard years. No rescue beacon, no emergency supplies recovered. Drop zone, the heart of the Thornback Expanse, home to the galaxy's most efficient killers. The Void Rippers. Kiara's golden eyes narrowed as her pod settled into the fetid soil with a hydraulic hiss. She'd seen recordings of Void Rippers, creatures that could shred power armor with their serrated limbs, that hunted in coordinated packs, that possessed a cognitive plasticity that bordered on true sapience. They were 15 feet of chitinous nightmare, with mandibles that could snap a preserver's spine like dried fiber. And Cooper had been out here for 3 days. The pod door decompressed, and the smell hit her first: rot, spores, and something acidic that made her auxiliary breathing tubes contract. She emerged with her plasma cutter drawn, scanning the dense undergrowth. Bioluminescent fungi pulsed in the shadows, casting everything in sickly green light. Something skittered through the canopy above, too fast to track. She had 12 hours before the extraction window closed. 12 hours to find Cooper's body, recover his neural recorder for the family, and get off this death world before the Void Rippers found her. The tracker in her palm pulsed, pointing northeast, the crash site. Kiara moved. The wreckage was worse than she'd expected. The Polaris Dawn's escape pod had carved a trench 200 meters long through the forest, shearing ancient trees and leaving a scar of scorched earth that still smoldered. The pod itself had crumpled like foil, its emergency systems stripped and scattered. Kiara approached carefully, her crest sweeping left and right, reading thermal signatures. No body, no blood. But there were footprints. Human boot treads, size 11, heading deeper into the forest. And something else. Tool marks. Someone had pried open the pod's emergency locker with a piece of sharpened metal, taking the survival kit, but leaving the beacon. Why would he leave the beacon? She followed the trail, noting how the undergrowth had been disturbed. Broken branches at shoulder height. Human shoulder height. Drag marks where something heavy had been pulled. And then, 50 meters from the crash, she found the first real evidence. A crude trap? Braided vines stretched between 2 trees at ankle height, attached to a sharpened sapling bent back under tension. Primitive, effective, and still armed. Kiara's skin flickered from teal to deep amber. Confusion mixed with concern. The preservers had always classified humans as soft. Tool users, certainly, but fragile things that required climate control and regular meals. Prey species that had stumbled into sentience and lucked into fusion drives before their own planet killed them. But this was vandalism against nature itself. This was a creature that refused to die. She pressed forward, her unease growing with each piece of evidence. More traps. A water collection system made from pod debris, marks on trees where bark had been stripped for fiber, and then, at the base of a massive thornwood, she found claw marks. Void Ripper claw marks. Fresh ones. Her crests flattened completely against her skull. The marks scored deep into the hardwood, the signature of a hunting pack establishing territory. She touched the gouges, still wet with the creature's marking pheromones. Josh Cooper had walked directly into a Void Ripper hunting ground. He was already dead, he had to be. She heard it before she saw it, a sound like wind through a graveyard, the rasping breath of something designed to kill. Kiara froze, every combat instinct screaming at her to run. Her hand moved to her plasma cutter, but she knew the truth. If a Void Ripper had decided to hunt her, she was already dead. The creatures moved with impossible speed, their chitinous bodies propelled by hydraulic muscle systems that could accelerate them from 0 to 60 kilometers per hour in under 2 seconds. The sound came again, closer, a clicking, chittering noise that her translator couldn't parse. She dropped into a predatory crouch, making herself small, and slid behind a massive fungal shelf. Then she saw it. The Void Ripper moved through the forest like liquid death, its 6 legs finding purchase on bark and stone with equal ease. 15 feet long from mandibles to tail stinger, its exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian in the bioluminescent gloom. The head was a nightmare of compound eyes and serrated mouthparts that ground against each other with a sound like breaking glass. It was hunting. Kiara's bioluminescence dimmed involuntarily, her body's natural camouflage kicking in. She pressed herself flatter against the ground, controlling her breathing, becoming stone. The creature's head swiveled, sampling the air with chemical receptors that could detect adrenaline at parts per million. It paused, those compound eyes fixed on her hiding spot. No. And then it moved on, disappearing into the undergrowth with frightening speed. The clicking faded. The forest settled back into its ambient nightmare. Kiara stayed frozen for a full minute, her heart hammering against her ribs. That creature, that thing, was the galaxy's most perfect predator. Evolution's masterpiece, honed over millions of years into pure, efficient death. And Josh Cooper, fragile human male with his soft skin and blunt teeth, had been stumbling through their territory for 3 days. She felt genuine sorrow for him. The preservers always taught that all species deserve dignity in death, even the prey species. She would find his remains, speak the rites, and ensure his memory lived on. It was all she could do now. The smell hit her an hour later, something foreign to Gaia 7's biological profile. Burning fat. Kiara's translator database flagged it immediately. Complex hydrocarbon combustion, protein thermal decomposition, and something else her sensors couldn't quite identify. She followed the scent, her confusion mounting with every step. Fire? On a world this humid? Impossible without accelerants, without sustained heat, without... The clearing opened before her like a stage, and there, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock with his back to her, was Josh Cooper. He was alive. Impossibly, incomprehensibly alive. But that wasn't what made Kiara's breath catch in her throat. It wasn't what made her crest stand fully erect in primal instinctual fear. It was what he was doing. The human had built a fire, a roaring, crackling blaze that pushed back the darkness for meters in every direction. The flames danced and popped, fed by carefully arranged wood that burned with steady, controlled heat. And roasting over that fire mounted on a spit of sharpened metal was a limb. A Void Ripper's limb. The chitinous plating had cracked open in the heat, exposing pale meat that sizzled and dripped fat into the flames. The smell that had drawn her here was the smell of the galaxy's apex predator being reduced to a meal. Josh turned the spit with casual familiarity, his movements economical and precise. He was humming something, a Terran melody that her translator tagged as folk music, genre, maritime labor. His flight jacket was torn and stained. His face was a mask of soot and grime, but his eyes were clear, focused, calm. He poked the meat with a piece of sharpened bone, nodded to himself, and then, impossibly, he pulled the limb from the fire, let it cool for exactly 3 seconds, and took a bite. Kiara's legs nearly gave out. The human was eating it, the thing that ate everything, that had evolved to be unkillable, undigestible, pure toxic death, wrapped in armor plating, and this soft pink creature was eating it. She must have made a sound, some involuntary noise of disbelief, because Josh Cooper's head snapped around with predatory precision. Their eyes met across the clearing, and Kiara realized, with a terror that dwarfed her earlier encounter with the Void Ripper, that she had made a terrible mistake. She wasn't the apex predator on this planet. She never had been. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Kiara's combat training screamed at her to draw her plasma cutter, to establish defensive posture, to assert dominance through display. But something older, something written into her DNA by 1 billion years of evolution, kept her frozen. This was a creature that sat beside fire, like it was a pet, a creature that had dismantled something that should have dismantled him. Josh Cooper studied her with those terrifyingly calm eyes, then turned back to his meal. "Your preserver caste," he said in flawless galactic standard, his accent barely noticeable. "Tracker variant, if I'm reading those crests right. They send you for the body?" His voice was rough, textured with days of disuse, but steady, rational, the voice of someone completely in control. Kiara's translator stumbled over her own language. "Yes, Scout Pilot Cooper, I was assigned to recover your remains." Remains. He huffed something that might have been a laugh. "Bit premature." He gestured to the fire with the piece of meat. "You want some? There's plenty. Thing was huge." Was. Past tense. Kiara's eyes tracked to the remains scattered around the clearing, and her analytical mind, trained to read ecosystems and biological interactions, began to piece together the story written in chitin and burned bone. The Void Ripper's corpse was arranged in a rough circle around the fire, not scattered by feeding frenzy, but systematically dismantled. The legs had been removed at the joints, not torn, but cut with precision, using what looked like one of the creature's own serrated limbs as a blade. The head was crushed, the compound eyes shattered from a single massive impact. And the carapace? The carapace had been cracked open like a ration pod, the soft organs inside carved out with surgical accuracy. This wasn't a desperate fight. This wasn't lucky survival. This was butchery. How? The word escaped Kiara before she could stop it. Josh looked up at her, and that 1,000-yard stare softened into something almost like amusement. "You've got databases on Earth fauna, right? Ever heard of persistence hunting?" She hadn't. He continued, rotating the spit again. "Humans aren't fast. We're not strong. We can't fly. We don't have venom. Our teeth are embarrassing." He pulled back his lips, showing those flat, grinding molars that every preserver textbook cited as proof of human fragility. "But we can run. Not sprint. Run. For hours. For days if we have to." His eyes drifted to the tree line, remembering. "That thing ambushed me on day 1. Fast as hell. Strong as hell. Scared the shit out of me. But it was built for explosive speed, not endurance. So I ran. Not away, just away enough. Kept it chasing me. Kept it burning energy it couldn't replace." He took another bite, chewed thoughtfully. "Took me 12 hours, but I ran it until it couldn't run anymore, until it was gasping, overheating, collapsing. Then," he gestured to a sharpened piece of pod debris leaning against a tree, a makeshift spear, its tip hardened in fire and stained dark. "Then it was just problem-solving." Kiara felt her worldview cracking like that carapace. The preservers had it all wrong. Humans weren't prey that got lucky. They were predators that got patient. "The fire," she managed. "Bow drill. Learned it when I was 8. He said it like it was nothing, like carrying flame in his hands was as natural as breathing. And Kiara realized to him it was, "You gonna keep standing there, or you going to sit?" Josh's voice cut through her paralysis. He gestured to a flat rock across the fire, an offering, not a command. "You look like you're about to bolt. Don't. There's at least 3 more of those things in the area, and you smell like prey." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same calm pragmatism he'd used to discuss running down a Void Ripper. Kiara's legs moved before her brain caught up. She circled the fire, keeping it between them, some instinct demanding a barrier, and lowered herself onto the rock. Her crests remained fully erect, broadcasting her fear in bioluminescent waves she couldn't control. Josh noticed. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're sapient. You're tracking me, which means you're trying to help. That makes you friendly." He pulled the spit from the fire again, carved off a chunk of meat with practiced efficiency, and extended it toward her on a flat piece of metal. "Here, high protein, surprisingly low in toxins once you cook it right." She stared at the offered meat like it was a live grenade. "It's safe," he assured her. "Already tested it on myself. Little bit gamey, but nothing a preserver digestive system can't handle. Your species eats silicon-based proteins, right?" "How do you—" "Read the mission briefs. Never know who you'll meet out here, he shrugged. Take it. You've been moving hard for hours. Your skin's flickering amber. That's stress coloration. You need calories. Slowly, carefully, Kiara reached across the fire and took the meat. It was warm, almost hot, and the texture was disturbingly pleasant. She took a small bite. Her taste receptors exploded. It was good, complex, layered, with a smoky richness that her databases tagged as Maillard reaction byproducts. The thing that had terrified her hours ago was now nutrients spreading through her system, fueling her exhausted body. Good, right? Josh smiled. Actually smiled, and her fear spiked again because those flat teeth that looked so harmless were the same teeth that had just solved the problem of the galaxy's apex predator. Fire changes everything. That's the secret they don't tell you in xenobiology class. Give a human fire, and suddenly we're not just surviving, we're cooking. Kiara struggled for words. This shouldn't be possible. Yeah, well, he stared into the flames, and for just a moment that 1,000-yard stare returned. Possible is a flexible concept when the alternative is being eaten alive. You adapt or you die. Humans got really good at adapting. Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the distant sounds of Gaia 7's nighttime ecology. Kiara ate slowly, her mind racing through the implications. Every preserver doctrine about the natural order was crumbling. Humans weren't supposed to be here, at this level of the food chain. They were supposed to be soft things that built ships and stayed in climate-controlled habitats. They were supposed to be safe. But Josh Cooper, with his fire and his spear and his terrifying, relentless patience, was the most dangerous thing on this planet. And he'd offered her dinner. Why? She finally asked. Why help me? Why not just let me leave? Josh looked up and his expression was genuinely confused. Because you came here to help me. Why would I do anything else? It was such a simple answer, such a human answer. And it terrified her more than anything else he'd done. So let me get this straight. Kiara's crests had finally begun to relax, lowering from their alarmed position to something closer to analytical curiosity. You killed that thing with running and a stick. Technically, running, a stick, and a trap. Josh gestured to the tree line where she could now see the disturbed earth, a pit covered with branches with sharpened stakes at the bottom. Channeled it toward the trap, let gravity do the hard work. Humans are big on leverage, force multiplication, work smarter, not harder. But the strength required to... Not that strong, he interrupted, poking the fire with a stick. Sparks swirled up into the darkness. Just persistent. That's the thing about humans, we don't quit. We can't quit. It's like a bug in our programming. Something tells us to stop, and we just keep going. Kiara studied him across the flames. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, feeding the fire, adjusting the wood placement, maintaining the perfect burn rate. Fire wasn't a tool to him, it was a companion, a weapon, a piece of home in a hostile universe. Your species frightens me, she admitted quietly. Josh paused, looked up at her. Yeah, I get that a lot. But his tone wasn't apologetic. It was matter of fact, tinged with something that might have been sympathy. Look, I'm not trying to be scary. This is just how we are. Humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us every single day. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans, everything wanted us dead. So you learned to kill back. No, he shook his head. We learned to outlast. There's a difference. Killing is easy. Any predator can kill. But outlasting, surviving when you shouldn't, turning a death world into a home, taking the thing that's trying to eat you and making it into dinner. He smiled that unsettling smile again. That's a human specialty. Kiara's translator struggled with the nuance in his words. Pride? Warning? Simple truth? The preservers teach that there is a natural order, she said carefully. Apex predators, prey species, the balance that holds ecosystems together. Your species violates that order. Does it? Josh leaned back, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Or did we just climb high enough to see the whole game board? Look, I'm not going to philosophize about humanity's place in the galaxy, but I know this. We don't have venom or claws or armor plating. What we have is this. He tapped his temple. Pattern recognition, problem-solving, adaptability, and stubbornness so profound it borders on stupidity. You could have died. Could have. Probably should have, he shrugged. But I didn't, and now I'm sitting by a fire eating the thing that tried to eat me, talking to a preserver tracker who's having an existential crisis. Not the worst outcome. Despite herself, despite everything, Kiara felt her skin flicker, a brief flash of gold that her species associated with amusement. A laugh, essentially. You find this funny? I find this ironic, she corrected. I came here to recover your body and honor your death. Instead, I'm being educated on human philosophy while eating my first grade S biohazard predator. First time for everything. Josh's expression softened. Look, I appreciate you coming out here. Takes guts to land on a world like this. Your extraction window still open? 7 hours. Good. We wait for dawn, signal your ship, and we both get off this rock alive. He paused. Unless you want to see something really cool first. Kiara's crests rose in alarm. Define cool. Josh grinned, and the sound that interrupted him made her blood freeze. A clicking, chittering, the sound of death approaching. From the darkness beyond the firelight, 6 compound eyes reflected the flames. The Void Ripper's mate had found them. The creature emerged from the darkness like a nightmare gaining substance. It was larger than the first, nearly 18 feet from mandibles to stinger, its carapace scarred from countless hunts. The clicking sound it made wasn't random. It was language, a complex series of calls that Kiara's translators struggled to parse. Threat display, territorial challenge, and grief. The creature's eyes fixed on the butchered remains of its mate, scattered around the fire in deliberate display. The clicking rose in pitch, becoming something almost like a scream. Kiara couldn't move, every muscle in her body locked down, every instinct screaming that she was already dead. This close, she could see the hydraulic muscles flexing under the carapace, could smell the pheromones it was releasing. Aggression markers, hunting scent. This thing could close the distance in under 2 seconds. Her plasma cutter would get 1 shot, maybe 2, before those mandibles carved her in half. Josh Cooper stood up, not quickly, not with alarm. He simply rose to his feet with the same economical motion he used for everything else, brushed soot from his jacket, and picked up the burning brand he'd been using to poke the fire. Stay behind the fire, he said quietly. Don't run. Running triggers pursuit response. It's going to kill us, Kiara heard herself whisper. Probably going to try. Josh rolled his shoulders, working out the stiffness. But it's going to have to work for it. The Void Ripper charged. Kiara's perception fractured into freeze frames. The creature launching forward with explosive force, its legs churning through the underbrush, mandibles spreading wide enough to engulf a torso. Josh stepped sideways and thrust the burning brand directly into the creature's face. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. The Void Ripper recoiled like it had hit a force field, its clicking becoming a shriek of confusion and pain. The flames, the fire, had triggered something primal in its nervous system. Fear. Real, instinctual fear of something it had never encountered in millions of years of evolution. That's right. Josh's voice had dropped to something lower, something predatory. You don't know what this is, do you? Your species never evolved fire. Never needed to. He advanced a step, and the creature, this perfect killing machine, backed up. But my species? We've been friends with fire for 200,000 years. The Void Ripper circled, trying to find an angle of attack that didn't involve the flames. Josh mirrored its movement, keeping the fire between them, his makeshift spear held loosely in his other hand. Here's the thing about apex predators, he continued, his voice steady despite the adrenaline that had to be flooding his system. They're apex because nothing challenges them, no predation pressure, no need to adapt. So when something does challenge them... He lunged forward with the brand, sending a spray of sparks into the creature's face. They don't know what to do. What followed wasn't a fight, it was a lesson in psychological warfare. Josh didn't try to kill the Void Ripper, not immediately. Instead, he used the fire like an extension of his own will, painting the darkness with burning arcs that sent the creature scrambling backward. Every time it tried to circle around, he was there, brand raised, flames dancing between them. And he was talking to it. Not in words. The creature wouldn't understand words, but in the universal language of dominance, territory, and threat. He made himself larger, spreading his arms wide. He made himself louder, his voice dropping into a guttural roar that Kiara's translator couldn't parse. He made himself fire, wreathed in light and heat that transformed him from soft pink prey into something primal and terrible. The Void Ripper's clicking became uncertain, confused. It had never encountered resistance before. Everything on Gaia 7 either fled or died. There was no third option in its evolutionary playbook. Josh was creating one. "You want this territory?" he shouted, gesturing to the clearing. "You want to avenge your mate? Come get it!" He slammed the spear into the ground, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "But you're going to burn for it." The creature lunged, finally, desperately, and Josh was ready. He didn't dodge backward. He moved into the attack, angling his body so the mandibles scraped past him instead of through him. The spear came up in a smooth arc, catching the creature under the head where the carapace was thinnest. Not a killing blow, a warning, a promise of what would come if it pressed the attack. Black blood sprayed, sizzling as it hit the flames. The Void Ripper stumbled, its hydraulic muscles misfiring from pain and confusion. Josh pressed the advantage, driving forward with the burning brand held high, roaring like something from humanity's ancient past. Something that had hunted mammoths across frozen steppes and stared down saber-toothed cats. A predator, not despite being human, but because of it. The creature broke. Kiara watched, stunned, as the galaxy's apex predator turned and fled into the darkness, its clicking now a sound of pure animal fear. It crashed through the undergrowth, desperate to escape the burning thing that refused to die. Josh stood at the edge of the firelight, breathing hard, the brand still held high like a beacon. And slowly, carefully, he turned back to face Kiara. "You okay?" he asked, as casually as if he'd just scared off a scavenger. Kiara realized she was shaking, not from cold. The fire kept the clearing warm despite the humid air. She was shaking from the fundamental restructuring of her understanding of the universe. You made it run," she whispered. "Yeah." Josh walked back to the fire, planted the brand back in the coals. "Didn't feel right killing it. Already took its mate, that's enough." He sat down heavily, the adrenaline clearly starting to fade. "Everything's got the right to live, even things trying to eat you. You just have to make them understand that eating you is more trouble than it's worth." "How are you so calm?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of 3 days of constant survival, of running and planning and fighting. "I'm not. I'm terrified. My hands are shaking, my heart's going about 200 beats per minute, and I'm going to crash hard in about 10 minutes. He managed a weak smile. "But you were here. Had to keep it together. Protect the team, right?" "I'm not your team, I'm just—" "You're here," he interrupted gently. "That makes you my team. That's how humans work. We don't leave people behind. We don't let our people face the dark alone." He gestured to the fire. "That's what this is. That's what fire means. It's the promise that as long as it burns, you're not alone. You're not prey. You're home." Kiara's crests were doing something strange, flickering through colors she didn't have names for. Emotions her species had never needed words for, because they'd never encountered a species like this. Fear, respect, and something else. Something warm that settled in her chest like the heat from the fire. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting me." Josh shrugged, but his smile was genuine. What else was I going to do? Dawn came to Gaia 7 like a reluctant guest, the toxic clouds taking on a sickly orange hue that turned the landscape into something from a fever dream. The fire had burned through the night, tended by Josh with the casual expertise of someone for whom fire was as natural as breathing. Kiara had dozed off somewhere around the 4th hour, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. When she woke, she found Josh sitting exactly where he'd been, feeding the flames, keeping watch. Keeping her safe. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Your extraction team's on approach. Should be here in 20 minutes. She sat up, her body stiff from sleeping on stone. "You didn't sleep." "Someone had to keep the fire going." He finally looked at her, and his expression was soft. "Besides, I'm used to it. Long-range scouts learn to push the limits. Sleep when you're safe, stay alert when you're not." "And you don't feel safe? Do you?" She considered the question. 12 hours ago, her answer would have been an absolute no. But now, sitting by this fire with this impossible human who'd made a death world into a temporary home. Yes, she admitted, I do. Josh smiled, a real smile, not the predatory grin from the night before. Good, that's the idea. The extraction shuttle descended like a metal angel, its thrusters scorching the clearing as it settled onto landing struts. The cargo ramp lowered, and Kiara saw her team leader, Marath, another preserver tracker, standing at the entrance with a medical kit. Kiara, you're alive, and Cooper! Marath stopped, staring at the scene. The fire, the Void Ripper remains, the two of them sitting together like they were at a camping retreat. What happened here? Kiara stood, her crests flickering with colors that would take hours to explain properly. A paradigm shift, she said simply. Josh rose as well, kicking dirt over the fire with the regretful motion of someone saying goodbye to an old friend. The flames died reluctantly, smoke rising into the toxic sky like a signal. We were here, we survived, we won. Ready to go home? He asked Kiara. She looked at him. This human who'd rewritten everything she thought she knew about predator and prey, about strength and survival, about the natural order that wasn't natural at all. Yes, she said. Then, surprising herself, will I see you again? Josh paused at the ramp, turned back. Galaxy's a big place, but humans have this saying, the universe is small for those who want to find each other. He tapped the faded patch on his jacket, the Terran Vanguard insignia. You ever need a scout, someone to show you how to survive the impossible? Look me up. I will, Kiara promised, and she meant it. As the shuttle lifted off, she watched through the viewport as Gaia 7 fell away beneath them. The Thornback expanse stretched out like a wound on the planet's surface, and somewhere down there, a Void Ripper nursed its wounds and told its pack about the burning thing that refused to die. The natural order had changed. The preservers would need to update their records. Humans weren't prey that got lucky. They were predators that brought their own light to the darkness. And Kiara, sitting beside Josh Cooper as the shuttle breached orbit, his jacket draped over her shoulders because the cabin was cold and he'd noticed her shivering, realized that perhaps the most terrifying thing about humans wasn't their refusal to die. It was their insistence on making sure you didn't die either. The fire had gone out on Gaia 7, but something else had been kindled in its place. And Kiara found herself hoping with a warmth she'd never felt before that it would never stop burning. 6 months later, Preserver Archive Station Theta 9. Kiara's presentation chamber was packed beyond capacity. She stood at the center of a circular amphitheater, surrounded by rising tiers of preserver scholars, xenobiologists, cultural conservators, and policymakers. Every crest in the room was angled toward her, a forest of sensory organs focused with laser intensity on the holographic display floating above her palm. The image showed Josh Cooper, frozen mid-motion, driving a burning brand toward a Void Ripper's face. This, Kiara said, her voice steady despite the weight of 300 pairs of golden eyes, is a Category 1 paradigm violation. What you're seeing should be impossible according to every predictive model in our archives. Archon Velth, eldest of the cultural conservators, leaned forward from his seat in the highest tier. His crests were pure white with age, and his voice carried the weight of 7 centuries of scholarship. Tracker Kiara, we have reviewed your sensory recordings extensively. The Council does not dispute the events of Gaia 7. What we dispute is your interpretation. With respect, Archon, there is no interpretation. Kiara gestured, and the hologram shifted to show the butchered Void Ripper, systematically dismantled around Josh's fire. Scout Pilot Cooper didn't survive through luck or accident. He survived through the deliberate application of human evolutionary advantages that our natural order classifications failed to account for. Persistence hunting, someone muttered from the mid-tiers. Thermal regulation, tool use. Yes, we've read the report. Then you understand the implications. Kiara's skin flickered amber, frustration bleeding through her professional composure. For 4,000 years, the preservers have maintained that humans are a prey species that achieved sentience through fortunate circumstances. Soft-bodied, weak, vulnerable. We placed them in Category 7, tool-using herbivores with omnivorous adaptations. She pulled up another hologram, the standard preserver taxonomy, with humanity's classification highlighted in blue. This classification is wrong, fundamentally dangerously wrong. The chamber erupted in clicking vocalizations, the preserver equivalent of heated debate. Archon Velth raised one long-fingered hand, and silence fell like a blade. Kiara took a breath, centering herself. This was the moment she'd been preparing for since her shuttle had left Gaia 7's gravity well. Humans aren't prey that learn to use tools. They're apex predators that learn to use everything. Fire, psychology, endurance, pattern recognition. They don't dominate through physical superiority. They dominate through adaptation and persistence. And most importantly, she met Velth's ancient gaze. They don't recognize the natural order because they never needed to. They made their own order, and then they exported it to the stars. You speak of them with reverence, Velth observed. Some might say with something beyond professional respect. Kiara's skin flashed gold, caught off guard. I speak of them with accuracy, Archon. And yes, with respect. Scout Pilot Cooper saved my life. More than that, he showed me that our fundamental understanding of galactic ecology is built on flawed assumptions. Or, Velth countered gently, you have developed an emotional attachment that colors your objectivity. This is not uncommon among field researchers exposed to traumatic bonding scenarios. This isn't trauma bonding, Kiara said, more sharply than she'd intended. This is data. Observable, repeatable data that suggests humans should be reclassified as Category 2, sapient apex predators with tool augmentation specialization. The chamber exploded again. Category 2 was reserved for species like the Void Rippers, creatures so fundamentally dangerous that entire worlds were quarantined around them. You cannot be serious, someone shouted from the upper tiers. Humans build hospitals, they write poetry, they cry at sad stories. And they persistence hunt megafauna until it collapses from exhaustion, Kiara shot back. They harness fire as casually as we breathe. They look at the galaxy's most lethal predators and see dinner. These things aren't contradictory. They're complementary. Humans are dangerous because they're empathetic. They understand other minds well enough to predict, manipulate, and dominate them. She pulled up the footage of Josh offering her meat across the fire. Look at this interaction. He fed me, protected me, made me feel safe in the heart of a Grade S biohazard zone. And in doing so, he completely restructured my threat assessment and loyalty matrices. That's not prey behavior. That's apex social bonding. That's how pack hunters create alliances. Velth was silent for a long moment, his crests rippling through thoughtful patterns. Finally, he spoke. Tracker Kiara, your observations are noted and will be submitted for peer review. However, any reclassification of humanity will require consensus from all 12 archive stations, plus formal input from the Terran Vanguard itself. This process will take years. We don't have years, Kiara said quietly. Not if we want to prevent misunderstandings that could turn deadly. Every day, preservers encounter humans in the field, on stations, in diplomatic situations. And every day, we're operating under the assumption that they're fragile, that they need protection, that they're somehow less than true predator species. She gestured to the frozen image of Josh, wreathed in firelight, facing down a Void Ripper. What happens when a preserver tries to protect a human who doesn't need protecting? What happens when we mistake their kindness for weakness? What happens when we push them into a corner and they respond the way Scout Pilot Cooper responded on Gaia 7? The silence in the chamber was absolute. I came here to file a report, Kiara said softly. But what I'm really doing is issuing a warning. Humans aren't what we think they are, and if we don't update our understanding, someone is going to make a very fatal mistake. Velth's crests lowered in what might have been acknowledgement. Your concerns are noted. The Council will deliberate. He paused. You are dismissed, Tracker Kiara, and you should know that Scout Pilot Cooper has requested permission to visit Theta 9. The Terran Vanguard approved his request 3 days ago. He arrives this evening. Kiara's bioluminescence flared bright gold before she could control it. The entire chamber saw it. Velth's expression didn't change, but his crests rippled in the pattern that meant I see you, and I understand. Dismissed, he repeated gently. Theta 9 observation deck, local sunset. The station's main observation deck was nearly empty at this hour, most personnel attending evening meal cycles or beginning their rest periods. Kiara stood at the transparent aluminum viewport, watching Theta 9's host star sink below the artificial horizon created by the station's rotation. She'd changed out of her formal presentation attire into something more comfortable, a thermal wrap that regulated her body temperature and left her crests free to express naturally. Not that they were behaving naturally at the moment, they kept flickering between colors she couldn't quite control: amber, anticipation, gold, pleasure, teal, uncertainty, and occasionally flashes of deep violet that her species associated with. She didn't want to name that emotion, not yet. Nice view. Kiara spun, her crest standing fully erect in surprise. Josh Cooper stood in the observation deck entrance, wearing a clean Terran Vanguard uniform instead of his distressed flight jacket. His hair was trimmed, his face clean-shaven, and he looked civilized, professional. Nothing like the soot-covered survivor who'd casually roasted apex predators over an open flame. "You're early," she managed. "Caught a fast courier. Thought I'd surprise you." He walked over to the viewport, standing a respectful distance away, close enough to be companionable, far enough to be appropriate. "How'd the presentation go?" "Poorly. Excellently. Both." Kiara's crests rippled through confused patterns. They don't want to believe that everything they know about humans is wrong. Can't blame them. Nobody likes having their worldview restructured. He smiled, that same gentle smile from the shuttle, not the predatory grin from the clearing. "For what it's worth, I read your preliminary report. Sent a copy to Terran Vanguard Command. They loved it." "They did? Oh, yeah. Turns out humanity's been trying to tell the galaxy we're not harmless for decades. Having a preserver, a respected preserver, say it for us carries way more weight." He glanced at her, and his expression was sincere. "Thank you for telling the truth, even when it was complicated." "It's not complicated," Kiara said quietly. "It's just different than what we expected." They stood in silence for a moment, watching stars wheel past beyond the viewport. Finally, Josh spoke again. "So, I have a proposition for you." Kiara's crests perked up. "I'm listening." Terran Vanguard is launching a new initiative, cross-species long-range scouting teams, humans paired with non-human specialists, specifically to bridge the understanding gap and improve first contact protocols. He turned to face her fully. "They asked me to lead the first team. I said yes, but only if I could choose my partner." Her skin flashed gold so brightly she almost lit up the observation deck. "You want me?" "I want someone who understands that different doesn't mean dangerous, someone who can see past classifications to what actually matters, someone who sat by a fire on a death world and decided to trust the guy roasting apex predators." His expression was soft. "Yeah, Kiara, I want you." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. Say you'll consider stepping away from the archives and actually seeing the galaxy instead of just cataloging it." He stepped closer, just one step, but it closed the distance from professional to personal. "Say you'll give me a chance to show you more impossible things." Kiara's mind raced through the implications. Leave the archives? Leave the structured, safe world of academia for the chaos of deep space exploration? With a human who'd fundamentally restructured her understanding of her own species' place in the galaxy? "What if I can't keep up with you?" she heard herself ask. "Humans are persistence hunters. You run for days. I'm built for bursts of speed, not endurance." Josh laughed, a genuine, warm sound that echoed through the observation deck. "Then I'll slow down. That's what partners do. You teach me to read alien ecosystems better. I'll teach you to keep running when your body says stop. We'll figure it out together." "Together," Kiara repeated, testing the word. "Yeah, like we did on Gaia 7, except with better supplies and ideally fewer things trying to eat us." She looked at him, really looked at him. This human who'd shown her that apex predators could be kind, that strength could be gentle, that the scariest thing in the galaxy was also the safest thing to stand beside. "I'll need to submit formal resignation papers, complete my pending research obligations, transfer my archive credentials. Her crests were flickering gold so rapidly it looked like a strobe. It could take weeks. I can wait weeks. Hell, I can wait months if that's what it takes. Josh's smile widened. Persistence, remember? It's kind of our thing. Yes, Kiara said, the word coming out before she'd fully processed it. Yes, I'll join your team. I'll be your partner. Yeah. For a moment, they just stood there, two beings from completely different evolutionary paths, looking at each other across the space between stars. Then slowly, Josh extended his hand, that universal human gesture of partnership, trust, and alliance. Kiara reached out with her own long-fingered hand and clasped it. His skin was warm. Not fire-hot, but human warm, the thermal regulation that let his species run down prey across scorching savannas. Her bioluminescence responded involuntarily, her skin glowing soft gold where they touched. So, Josh said, not letting go. Want to grab dinner? I've been dying to try that preserver place on Deck 7. Heard they serve crystalline proteins in ways that'd make your taste receptors very happy. You researched preserver cuisine? Researched a lot of things about preservers in the last 6 months. He finally released her hand, but his expression remained warm. Figured if I was going to ask you to be my partner, I should probably understand what matters to you, what makes you happy, what you need to thrive. Kiara's crests did something they'd never done before. They formed the pattern that meant home. A configuration she'd only seen in archival footage of mated pairs. She quickly smoothed them back to neutral, hoping he hadn't noticed. But of course he had. Humans didn't miss details. Dinner sounds perfect, she said. And Josh? Yeah? Thank you for coming back, for... She gestured helplessly, trying to encompass everything, the fire, the protection, the offer, the understanding. For all of it. What else was I going to do? He said, echoing his words from that night on Gaia 7. As they walked toward the deck, 7 commissary together, Kiara realized something profound. The preservers had been wrong about more than just humanity's classification. They'd been wrong about what made something an apex predator. It wasn't claws or venom or armor plating. It wasn't even fire or tools or persistence. It was the willingness to protect instead of dominate, to share instead of hoard, to bring others into the light instead of leaving them in darkness. Josh Cooper was an apex predator not because he could kill a Void Ripper, but because he'd chosen to save her instead. And as they sat down to dinner, him carefully explaining the complex mineral structures in her crystalline protein salad, her teaching him the proper preserver gestures for gratitude and respect, Kiara understood that the real paradigm shift wasn't in the archive's taxonomy. It was in her own heart. The fire Josh had lit on